We're not in favour of removing juries per se, but we do think that there is significant evidence now in Scotland to say that juries struggle with sexual offence trials. It's important to realise that in Scotland we actually conducted one of the biggest pieces of research into juries that's been done, and that's what informed Lady Dorian's review. Now, that research found that juries really struggle in particular with sexual offence trials, and one of the findings of that review was that there is overwhelming evidence that rape myths affect the way in which jurors evaluate evidence in rape cases. Now, Professor James Chalmers and Fiona Leverick did a huge amount of work around this, and that is what has informed actually this recommendation that Lady Dorian made that eventually came into as featuring in the bill. And I think it's important to say that we're not in favour of removing juries per se, but we do think that there is significant evidence now in Scotland to say that juries struggle with sexual offence trials. They struggle with understanding direction. They struggle with some of the legal complexity, and they also are influenced, as this research has found, significantly by rape myths,
Right.
and that affects their decision making. So that is where this comes from. It is about fairness. I think it's important to say, and it is about making sure that the accused receives a fair trial, but also that complainers do too.
Do you think that the accused should have to agree, Kate?
I think that is something to be explored within the pilot. I think that's really important, an important aspect to this being proposed as a pilot rather than a full-scale change. I think that there is precedent for this in other jurisdictions across the world, and I think it's also important to remember that juries are not used in every single trial in Scotland. Most of the trials that are heard through sheriff courts are decided upon by sheriffs themselves, not with a jury, and a significant amount of domestic abuse, for example, is heard through that process. I think it's important to recognise that what we're talking about here is a pilot. The research that has been discussed in England, there is evidence to suggest that because that research was done by real jurors, that they were reluctant to be honest about what influenced their decision making, and that they were aware of what was socially acceptable and what wasn't. So there is, there is a level of scepticism about that research. And in Scotland, of course, there was no option of being able to do research with real juries. You actually legally can't do that, which is why the research was approached in Scotland in the way that it was. I agree that looking carefully at societal attitudes around women, around sexual offences, around consent and around behaviour is really important as well. But I do think that there is, we've got to a point now where we do understand that juries struggle in sexual offence cases and we need to do something different, which is why I think this pilot is so important.